The stars looked different from the bridge of the UNS Leviathan. Commander Jake Morrison had been staring at them for the past hour, watching as the massive council station grew larger on the view screen. He was a tall man with gray eyes and dark hair that had started turning silver at the temples. At 43 years old, he had spent 20 years in the space service, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. 47 different species from across the galaxy met there to make decisions, settle disputes, and keep the peace. They had invited humanity to join them decades ago, right after first contact, but Earth had said no. Not yet, the diplomats had told them. We need time to prepare. The Council had not been happy about that answer. They had sent more invitations, then warnings, then demands, and finally 6 months ago they had sent a summons. It was not a request anymore. Humanity would appear before the Council and explain why they had refused to help during the recent war. The war had been brutal. An empire called the Krell Dominion had been conquering systems across the outer sectors for 5 years. Millions had died. Entire planets had been destroyed. The Council species had thrown everything they had at the Krell, and they had barely won. Their fleets were shattered. Their economies were struggling, and through it all humanity had stayed silent, watching from behind their borders. Now they wanted answers. Lieutenant Amy Peterson looked up from her station. She was young, only 26, with blonde hair tied back in a regulation bun. Her hands moved quickly across her console as data streamed across her screens. Captain, we're receiving multiple scanning attempts, she reported. The station is trying to penetrate our shields. So are at least 15 ships in orbit. Jake smiled slightly. Let them scan. They won't understand what they find. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Ben Harris chuckled. Ben was 51, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He had been Jake's second in command for 8 years, and they understood each other without needing many words. Think they're expecting a fleet? Ben asked quietly. Probably, Jake replied. They're used to thinking in numbers. More ships means more power. That's how they've always done it. They're going to be surprised. That's the idea. The Leviathan continued its approach. On the view screen, the Council station looked like a small city floating in space. Thousands of ships orbited around it, everything from tiny shuttles to massive carriers. Most of them showed signs of recent battle. Scorched hulls, patched armor, missing sections that had been hastily rebuilt. These were the survivors of the Krell War, and they looked tired. Amy spoke again. Sir, the station is hailing us. They want us to dock at Bay 47. They're also requesting that we limit our delegation to no more than 10 people. Jake thought about that for a moment. The Council was used to being in control. They wanted humanity's representatives inside their station, where they could control the environment and the conversation. It was a power play, subtle but clear. Tell them we'll send a shuttle with our diplomatic team, Jake said. But the Leviathan will remain in open space. That's our standard protocol. Ben raised an eyebrow. They won't like that. They don't have to like it. They just have to accept it. Amy sent the message and then turned back to her console. For a few minutes there was silence on the bridge. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the engines and the soft beeping of various systems. Everyone knew what was coming. They had trained for this moment for years. Finally, Amy looked up. They've accepted our terms, sir. Bay 47 is prepared for our shuttle. Ambassador Mitchell is ready to depart. Jake nodded. Clear the shuttle for launch. And Amy, keep all sensors at maximum. I want to know if anything on that station even thinks about pointing a weapon at us. Yes, sir. The shuttle detached from the Leviathan's docking bay and began its short journey to the station. On the view screen, Jake watched it go. Inside that small craft was Ambassador Claire Mitchell and 4 Marines in dress uniforms. Claire was the best diplomat Earth had, smart and tough and absolutely fearless. If anyone could handle the Council, it was her. But Jake knew that words would only go so far. The Council species were old and proud. They had been running the galaxy for thousands of years. They thought they knew everything about war and power, and how civilizations should behave. They were about to learn that humanity had different ideas. Ben moved closer to Jake and lowered his voice. You think they'll push us? Yes, Jake said simply. They're angry and they're scared. The Krell hurt them badly. Now humanity shows up with technology they don't understand. They'll push to see what we do. And what will we do? Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. We'll show them exactly what they wanted to see. Our military capability. On the tactical display, hundreds of ships surrounded the council station. Xanthari cruisers, Mirathi destroyers, Luminar corvettes. Every major species in the council had vessels here, either as guards or as observers. They would all be watching. They would all be recording. Whatever happened next would spread across the entire galaxy within days. That was fine. Humanity wanted them to see. The shuttle reached the station and docked smoothly. Jake could imagine Claire and her team stepping out into the alien environment, surrounded by species that looked at humans with suspicion and anger. But Claire would not show any fear. She would walk into that council chamber with her head high and her voice steady. "Amy, how long until the council session starts?" Jake asked. 15 minutes, sir. Good, make sure we're recording everything. Full spectrum analysis. I want every word, every reaction, every detail. Already set up, Captain. Jake turned to look at his crew. There were 1,800 people aboard the Leviathan, and every one of them was ready. They came from all over Earth. Different countries, different cultures, different languages. But they were united in their purpose. They were here to make sure that humanity would never be vulnerable again. The galaxy was about to change. For 12,000 years, the Council had set the rules. They had decided who was strong and who was weak. They had determined which species mattered and which did not. Earth had been watching all of that, studying it, learning from it. And while the Council had been fighting their war with the Krell, humanity had been building. They had not built a fleet. They had built something better, something that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about power and warfare. The Leviathan was not just a ship. It was a statement. It was a promise and a warning wrapped together in 3 kilometers of armor and weapons. Ben checked his watch. 10 minutes until the session. Jake nodded and settled into his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations with calm efficiency. They knew their jobs. They trusted each other, and they trusted their ship. All stations, this is the captain, Jake said over the internal comm. The council session is about to begin. Maintain full readiness. We're about to make history. A chorus of acknowledgments came back from all over the ship. Engineering, weapons, medical, navigation, everyone was ready. Jake looked at the view screen one more time. The council station gleamed in the light of the local sun. Around it, the council fleet waited. They looked strong. They looked prepared. But Jake knew better. He had studied every one of those ships. He knew their capabilities, their weaknesses, their tactical doctrines. The council thought they were the peak of military technology. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The Leviathan hung in space, motionless and silent. From the outside, it looked like a mountain of metal and armor. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with no decorative features or unnecessary details. It was built for function, not beauty. Every surface served a purpose. Every system was optimized for maximum efficiency. The council species had nothing like it. They could not even imagine building something like it. Their military thinking was based on fleets and formations, on large numbers of smaller ships working together. They had never considered that one vessel could be enough. That was about to change. 2 minutes, sir, Amy said quietly. Jake took a slow breath. Here we go. Ambassador Claire Mitchell stepped off the shuttle and into a world of aliens. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 50 shuttles the size of hers. The walls were made of some kind of smooth metal that shifted colors in the light. Hundreds of beings moved through the space, and not one of them was human. Claire was 52 years old and had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. She had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and territorial disputes on Earth. But this was different. These were not humans with different politics. These were entirely different species with minds that worked in ways she could barely understand. Behind her, 4 Marines stood in perfect formation. They wore dress uniforms, dark blue with gold trim, and they looked sharp and professional. Each carried a sidearm, though Claire doubted the weapons would be useful if things went badly. The council had made it clear that only light personal defense weapons were allowed. A tall insectoid being approached them. It had 6 legs, compound eyes that glittered with hundreds of facets, and mandibles that clicked together as it moved. This was a Xanthari, Claire knew, one of the founding species of the council. Ambassador Mitchell, the Xanthari said through a translation device that hung around what passed for its neck. I am Facilitator Kren. I will escort you to the council chamber. Thank you, Claire said, keeping her voice polite but not deferential. Every interaction here would be watched and analyzed. She needed to project confidence without arrogance. They walked through corridors that seemed designed for beings of many different sizes. Some sections had high ceilings for tall species. Others had lower passages for smaller ones. The walls showed displays of council history, images of different species working together, building things, exploring space. You will address the full council, Kren said as they walked. All 47 member species will be present. High Counselor Vexthera will lead the proceedings. I understand, Claire replied. The council is very interested in hearing humanity's explanation for your absence during the Krell conflict. Claire heard the edge in Kren's translated voice. Interested was probably not the right word. Angry was more accurate. The council species had lost millions of people fighting the Krell. Entire fleets had been destroyed. Colonies had been wiped out. And humanity had watched it all happen without sending a single ship to help. They reached a set of massive doors that must have been 30 meters high. The doors opened smoothly, and Claire walked into the council chamber. She stopped for just a moment, taking it all in. The chamber was circular and huge. Tiered seating rose up on all sides, creating an arena-like space. Thousands of beings filled those seats, representing dozens of species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Claire had trouble identifying which parts were their heads. The air hummed with translation technology, turning all their different languages into something everyone could understand. In the center of the chamber was a circular platform. That was where Claire was supposed to stand. She walked to it with steady steps, her Marines taking positions around the edges. She could feel thousands of eyes watching her. Some curious, some hostile, some calculating. High Counselor Vexthera rose from the central dais. He was Xanthari like Kren, but larger and older. His exoskeleton had a darker color, and his movements were slower, more deliberate. When he spoke, his voice filled the chamber. Humanity stands before this council to answer for their inaction. While the civilized galaxy bled against the Krell menace, Earth remained hidden behind its borders. Thousands of worlds burned. Millions died. And you did nothing. Claire had prepared for this. She knew they would start with accusations. It was a standard negotiating tactic. Make the other side defensive. Force them to justify themselves. But she was not going to play that game. We observed, Claire said clearly. We assessed the situation, and we determined that the conflict did not require our intervention. The reaction was immediate. Angry sounds erupted from all around the chamber. Chirps, growls, electronic screeches. The translation system struggled to keep up with all the different voices expressing outrage. A feline-like being stood up in the Marathi section. This was Counselor Drin, Claire knew. The Marathi had lost more ships than any other species during the war. Not require intervention? Drin's fur was standing up along her spine. The Krell destroyed 17 systems. They enslaved entire populations. Your arrogance is astounding. Claire kept her expression calm. Our assessment was that the combined council forces were sufficient to contain the threat. We saw no need to escalate. Contain? Vexthera's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. We lost 60% of our military fleet. Entire species now exist only as refugees. And you dare speak of containment? This was the moment. Claire knew what she had to say next, and she knew it would make them even angrier. But it was the truth, and they needed to hear it. You lost 60% of your fleet because your tactics were predictable, she said. Your technology was stagnant. Your command structure prioritized politics over strategy. The Krell exploited every weakness. We watched them do it. The chamber exploded. Species that had been rivals for centuries suddenly found common ground in their rage at humanity. Security drones activated, hovering near the ceiling in case the situation became violent. Delegates were shouting across the arena, their voices overlapping in a chaos of anger. Vexthera raised his front legs, calling for order. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. Your words are extremely offensive, Ambassador Mitchell, he said coldly. You criticize our efforts while your own species contributed nothing. I'm not criticizing your efforts, Claire replied. I'm explaining why we chose not to add our forces to yours. Your strategies were known to us. The Krell strategies were known to us. We ran simulations. We analyzed probable outcomes. And we determined that your victory was likely, though costly. And if we had lost? Drin demanded. If the Krell had won, would humanity have intervened then? Yes, Claire said simply. If the Krell had posed a genuine threat to galactic stability, we would have acted. But they did not. They were a regional power, not a galaxy-wide threat. Another Xanthari counselor stood. Perhaps humanity should demonstrate what they would have done differently. Show us this mighty fleet you've been building while we suffered. Claire had been waiting for this. She knew the council would demand proof. They would not believe that humanity had anything significant to offer. They would think Earth was bluffing, trying to save face. She touched a control on her wrist. Commander Morrison, the council would like a demonstration of our military capabilities. Jake's voice came back immediately. Understood, Ambassador. Transmitting our specifications now. In the chamber, every display screen suddenly lit up with data. Numbers and schematics appeared, showing the details of the UNS Leviathan. For a moment, there was silence as the council members looked at the information. Then the question started. This cannot be accurate, someone said. These mass readings are impossible. The power output exceeds anything we've ever measured. The armor thickness alone would make this vessel unable to move. Their weapon systems use technology we don't even have theories for. Vexathera stared at the display showing the Leviathan's basic outline. 3 kilometers long, 47 million tons. Shields that could absorb energy equivalent to a small star's output. Weapons that could crack planets. This is a fabrication, he said. No single vessel could have these capabilities. Claire smiled slightly. Would you like us to prove it? The council chamber went quiet. Every being there understood what she was offering. A test, a demonstration. Humanity was willing to put their ship up against the council's forces to prove that the data was real. Drin's ears flattened against her head. You cannot be serious. You would risk your vessel in combat? Commander Morrison is authorized to conduct a non-lethal demonstration against any council forces willing to participate, Claire said. We'll prove that our data is accurate. Vexathara's mandibles clicked slowly. He was thinking, weighing options. The rest of the council was silent, waiting to see what he would decide. This was unprecedented. A newly contacted species was challenging the council's military forces to test their capabilities. The Xanthari battle group will accept your challenge, Vexathara said finally. 6 heavy cruisers. They will engage your vessel in a controlled combat scenario. No live weapons, of course. Claire's smile widened slightly. Actually, Counselor, we insist that your forces use live weapons. Full combat loads. We want there to be no question about the results. Now there was shock in the chamber. Genuine shock. The idea of deliberately inviting attack was insane by council standards. Ships were expensive and took years to build. No one risked them unnecessarily. You would allow our forces to fire upon your vessel with lethal intent? Vexathara asked carefully. Yes, the Leviathan's defenses are more than adequate. We have complete confidence in our ship and crew. And if we damage or destroy your vessel, then we were wrong about our capabilities and you'll have your answer about humanity's military strength. Vexathara looked around the chamber, reading the mood of the other counselors. They were all thinking the same thing. If humanity was bluffing. Jake watched the shuttle dock with the Leviathan and felt the slight vibration through the deck as the docking clamps engaged. A few minutes later, Ambassador Mitchell appeared on the bridge, still wearing her formal diplomatic attire. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the hint of satisfaction in her eyes. How did it go? He asked, though he had heard most of it through the live feed. Exactly as expected, Claire replied. They're angry, defensive, and deeply skeptical. The Xanthari are sending 6 heavy cruisers to test us in 1 hour. Ben whistled softly. 6 heavies. They're not playing around. Neither are we, Jake said. He turned to Amy. Send a message to the Xanthari battle group. We'll meet them at coordinates Delta 7. Open space, no nearby structures. I don't want any accidents if debris goes flying. Yes, sir. Claire moved to stand beside Jake's command chair. They don't believe the specifications we provided. They think we're either lying or delusional. They'll learn, Jake said simply. The next hour passed in preparation. The Leviathan moved to the designated coordinates, a region of empty space about 5,000 kilometers from the council station. Far enough to be safe for observers, close enough for clear sensor readings. The Xanthari battle group moved into position 3,000 kilometers away, 6 warships spreading into a standard combat formation. On the view screen, Jake could see them clearly. Each cruiser was about 600 meters long, built with the distinctive Xanthari design aesthetic. They looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and what appeared to be a chitinous outer hull. Their weapons ports were visible along the flanks, and their shield emitters glowed with a faint blue light. "All stations report status," Jake ordered. One by one, the reports came in. Engineering reported full power. Weapons reported all systems armed and ready. Shields reported maximum capacity. Medical had trauma teams standing by, though Jake doubted they would be needed. Every department on the ship was ready for whatever came next. "Zenthari Battle Group is hailing us," Amy said. Audio only. "Put them through." A new voice filled the bridge, translated into English by the communication system. "Human vessel Leviathan. This is Battle Commander Tresh of the Zenthari Third Fleet. We are prepared to begin the demonstration. I want to make something clear. My ships will fire with full combat loads. We will not hold back. If your vessel is damaged or destroyed, that responsibility lies with you." Jake smiled slightly. "Understood, Battle Commander. The Leviathan is ready. You may begin when you are prepared." There was a pause. "You understand that our plasma weapons can reduce a standard cruiser to vapor in under a minute?" "Yes. And you still want us to fire on you with full power?" "That's the entire point of this demonstration, Commander. The Council wants to see our capabilities. Show them what you can do." Another pause, longer this time. Jake could imagine the Zenthari commander discussing this with his officers. "This entire situation went against every military instinct. You did not deliberately expose your vessel to enemy fire unless you had no other choice." "Very well," Tresh said finally. "We will commence firing in 2 minutes. I suggest your crew brace for impact." The channel closed. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was calm and focused. They had run through this scenario in simulations dozens of times. They knew what to expect. "Amy, open a broadcast channel to all Council ships in the station. I want everyone to see this. Channel open, sir. We're transmitting on all standard frequencies." "Good. Let them watch." On the tactical display, Jake could see dozens of ships repositioning to get better sensor angles. The Council wanted clear data on what was about to happen. They would get it. Lieutenant Kyle Sanders spoke from the weapons station. He was 32, with red hair and a calm demeanor that never changed no matter how stressful the situation. "Sir, Zenthari ships are powering up their main weapons. Plasma cannons charging. Missile tubes loading." "Understood. Shields?" "Shields at maximum, all frequencies." "We're ready." Jake settled back in his command chair. Then we wait. The 2 minutes passed slowly. On the view screen, the Zenthari cruisers hung in space, their weapons glowing brighter as power built up. Jake could see the faint distortion around their hulls that indicated active shields. They were preparing for a fight, even though they expected the Leviathan to be helpless. 30 seconds, Kyle said quietly. The bridge was silent except for the soft sounds of the ship's systems. Everyone knew their jobs. No one needed orders at this point. 10 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Zenthari opened fire simultaneously. 6 plasma cannons discharged their energy in brilliant streams of superheated matter. The bolts crossed the distance between the ships in under 3 seconds. Moving at a significant fraction of light speed, they struck the Leviathan's shields in a spectacular display of light and energy. Inside the ship, nothing happened. No shake, no vibration. The lights did not even flicker. Kyle checked his console. Shield impact registered. Shields holding at 99.2% capacity. Minimal energy transfer to hull. Follow-up volley incoming, Amy reported. Missiles launched. Count as 240. The missiles appeared on the tactical display, streaking toward the Leviathan in coordinated waves. They were sophisticated weapons, designed to overwhelm shields through sheer numbers. Each carried enough explosive power to crater a small moon. They struck the shields in rapid succession, detonating in a chain reaction of fireballs. The space around the Leviathan turned into a roiling mass of explosions. The view screen automatically dimmed to protect human eyes from the intense light. Missile impacts complete, Kyle said. Shields at 98.4%. No damage to hull or internal systems. Jake opened the channel to the Zenthari commander. Is that your best effort, Commander Tresh? There was no immediate response. Jake could imagine the chaos on the Zenthari ships as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Their most powerful weapons had just struck a target, and that target had barely noticed. Continue firing, Tresh's voice came back, and Jake could hear the strain in it. All ships, continuous barrage. Maximum rate. The Zenthari cruisers opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons fired as fast as they could recharge. Missile launchers emptied their magazines. Even their point defense lasers designed to shoot down incoming projectiles were turned on the Leviathan. The 6 ships poured enough firepower to level a continent into the human vessel. Jake watched the shield readings. They barely moved. The Leviathan's shields were designed to withstand punishment from weapons far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. The Xanthari were using technology that humanity had studied and surpassed years ago. "They're slowing down," Ben observed. "Thermal signatures indicate they're overheating their weapons." "How long have they been firing?" 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Jake nodded. 3 minutes of continuous fire, and the Leviathan's shields were still above 95% capacity. The Council was getting their demonstration. Every ship out there was recording this. Every species would see the data. "Sir, the Xanthari have ceased firing," Amy reported. "All 6 ships are venting heat. Their weapons are offline." On the view screen, Jake could see the Xanthari cruisers. Sections of their hulls glowed from the heat of sustained weapons fire. They were designed for short, intense engagements, not prolonged bombardments. They had pushed their systems to the limit and achieved nothing. "Open a channel to Commander Tresh," Jake said. "Channel open, sir." "Commander, thank you for the demonstration. Your crews performed admirably. Now it's our turn." Jake turned to Kyle. "Target their shield generators. Minimum yield. I want them disabled, not destroyed." "Aye, sir." Railguns locked on target. Firing solutions calculated. "Fire!" The Leviathan's railguns spoke once. It was not dramatic. There was no visible beam, no flash of light. The weapons used electromagnets to accelerate tungsten slugs to enormous velocities. The projectiles were small, only about 30 centimeters long, but they were moving at nearly 20% of light speed. They struck the Xanthari cruisers before anyone could react. 6 impacts perfectly placed. The shield generators on each ship exploded simultaneously, venting atmosphere and energy. The shields collapsed instantly, leaving the cruisers exposed. But the hulls were intact. Not a single breach. Not one casualty. Jake had ordered minimum yield, and that was exactly what his crew had delivered. The Xanthari ships were disabled, helpless but undamaged beyond the specific systems that had been targeted. The silence on the open channel was absolute. Every Council species was watching this, trying to process what they had just witnessed. 6 veteran warships, ships that had survived the Krell War, had been neutralized in under 2 seconds by a single vessel. Jake waited, giving them time to understand. Then he opened the channel again, broadcasting to every ship in the Council station. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Nations ship Leviathan. What you just witnessed was a demonstration of minimum force. Our weapons were set to the lowest possible yield. We targeted only shield generators and we disabled them without harming the crews. This was not an attack. This was a lesson." He paused, letting that sink in. "Humanity did not participate in your war with the Krell because we..." Part 4. The Council chamber was different when Claire returned. The atmosphere had changed from hostile to wary. Thousands of delegates still filled the tiered seats, but now they watched the human ambassador with something approaching respect mixed with fear. They had seen the data. They had watched their finest warships disabled in seconds. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was not weak. Claire stood in the center of the chamber once again, her Marines at their positions. But this time, High Counselor Vexithera did not begin with accusations. He began with questions. "Ambassador Mitchell, how many vessels like the Leviathan does humanity possess?" Claire had expected this question first. It was the obvious one. The Council needed to know if the Leviathan was unique, or if Earth had more ships like it. "That information is classified," she said clearly. "What you need to understand is that the Leviathan is not an experimental prototype. It is an operational warship, part of Earth's defense fleet. How many more we have is not something we're prepared to discuss at this time." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not getting an answer was almost as informative as getting one. If humanity only had one ship like this, they would probably say so. The fact that they refused to answer suggested there were more. Counselor Dren stood, her feline features tight with tension. "You claim you did not intervene in the Krell War because it was unnecessary, but you must have known we would suffer heavy casualties. Millions died, Ambassador. How can you justify watching that happen?" Claire met the Marathi's eyes steadily. We ran projections based on Council military capabilities and Krell strategies. Our analysis showed an 87% probability that Council forces would achieve victory within 5 years. The actual timeline was 4 years and 9 months. We were correct. And the 13% chance that we would lose? If Council forces had begun to fail, we would have intervened. But our assessment was that your combined fleets, while using outdated tactics, still had sufficient strength to prevail. We were monitoring the situation constantly. Another counselor stood. This was Zeth, a crystalline being from the Luminar Concordance. His body caught the light and refracted it in rainbow patterns, and his voice sounded like wind chimes. You speak of outdated tactics. What makes humanity's approach superior? Claire gestured to one of the chamber displays. May I? Vexithera clicked his mandibles, and what she had learned was assent. Claire pulled up a tactical analysis on the screens, showing battle data from the Krell War. This is the Battle of Kelton 4, she said. 3 Council battle groups against 2 Krell fleets. You outnumbered them approximately 2 to 1. You should have won decisively. Instead, you lost 40% of your forces, and the battle ended in a tactical draw. The Council watched the replay of the battle. Ships maneuvered in formations that had been standard for thousands of years. Weapons fired in predictable patterns. It was textbook Council military doctrine. The problem, Claire continued, is that your doctrine has not evolved in centuries. You fight wars the way you've always fought them. The Krell studied your methods and exploited every predictable element. They knew where you would position your ships. They knew when you would fire. They knew how you would respond to flanking maneuvers. And humanity would do differently? Dryan asked, her tone skeptical. We already do. Human military doctrine is built on unpredictability and technological superiority. We don't rely on numerical advantage. We rely on individual ship capability and adaptive tactics. The Leviathan can defeat an entire battle group alone, because it was designed to do exactly that. One ship cannot replace a fleet, Vexithara said firmly. It is logically impossible. It is logically impossible based on your experience, Claire corrected. But your experience is limited to Council technology and Council military theory. Humanity approached warfare from a different direction. We didn't try to build more ships than everyone else. We built better ships. She pulled up another display, showing a comparison between a standard Council cruiser and the Leviathan. The differences were stark. The Council cruiser had weapons, shields, and armor that were adequate by galactic standards. The Leviathan had weapons that used principles the Council did not fully understand, shields that could absorb orders of magnitude more energy, and armor thick enough to survive impacts that would vaporize normal vessels. How did you achieve this level of technology? Zeth asked. Your species only reached space a few centuries ago. Most Council species took thousands of years to develop their current capabilities. We learned from you, Claire said simply. When we made first contact, we were given access to Council databases. We studied your technology, your history, your wars. We saw what worked and what did not. And then we applied human engineering principles to improve on what we learned. You stole our technology, someone accused from the upper tiers. We used information that was freely provided to us, Claire corrected. And then we innovated. That is not theft. That is intelligent use of available resources. Vexithera leaned forward. Why did you not share these innovations with the Council? If you had such advanced technology, you could have offered it during the Krell War. Would you have accepted it? Claire asked bluntly. If humanity had offered to help, would the Council have welcomed our assistance? Or would you have rejected it out of pride and suspicion? Silence in the chamber. They all knew the answer. If Earth had offered help during the war, the Council would have been deeply suspicious of human motives. They would have questioned why humanity was suddenly so eager to assist. They might have even suspected humanity of working with the Krell. You're right, Claire said into the silence. You would not have trusted us. So we waited. We watched. And when you survived the war on your own, we knew you were strong enough to be respected rather than protected. Dryan's tail lashed behind her. Protected? You think we need protection? No, Claire said. That's exactly the point. You proved you could handle the Krell. You proved you could survive a major threat without outside help. That makes you strong. That makes you equals. Equals? Vexathara's mandibles clicked rapidly. You disabled 6 of our best warships in seconds, and now you call us equals? Military capability is not the only measure of strength, Claire replied. The Council has maintained peace across 47 species for 12,000 years. That is an achievement humanity cannot match. You have built a civilization that spans hundreds of worlds. You have created art, culture, science. You have survived wars, plagues, and disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. That makes you strong in ways that have nothing to do with weapons. She paused, looking around the chamber. Humanity has one advantage right now. We have better weapons, but we have no experience governing a multi-species coalition. We have no experience managing galactic trade networks. We have no experience mediating disputes between civilizations that think in completely different ways. These are things the Council does every day. These are areas where you are far superior to us. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted slightly. The Council delegates were listening now, really listening, instead of just reacting with anger. So what does humanity want? Zeth asked. Why are you here? We want what we've always wanted, Claire said. To be part of the galactic community on equal terms. We will not accept a subordinate position. We will not allow other species to dictate our policies or our actions. But we're willing to cooperate, to trade, to share knowledge. We're willing to be allies, not subjects. And if the Council refuses? Vexathara asked carefully. Then we continue as we have been. Earth remains independent behind our own borders. We trade with species that are willing to deal with us on fair terms. We defend ourselves if necessary. But we prefer cooperation to isolation. Another counselor stood. This was Prell, a reptilian being from the Saurian Confederacy. His species had lost heavily during the Krell War, and he had been one of the most vocal critics of humanity earlier. You say you want cooperation, Prell hissed, but you threaten us with your weapons, you destroy our ships to prove your strength. How is this cooperation? We disabled your ships, Claire corrected. At your request, the Council demanded a demonstration of our capabilities. We provided exactly that, and we did it without causing a single casualty. If we wanted to threaten you, Counselor Prell, this conversation would be very different. She let that sink in for a moment. Humanity could have arrived here with demands backed by force. We could have threatened to destroy the Council station unless you agreed to our terms. We could have positioned the Leviathan as a weapon pointed at your heart. We did none of those things. Instead, we came here to talk. We answered your summons. We submitted to your judgment. And only when you asked for proof did we demonstrate our strength. A clever argument, Vexathara said slowly. But it does not change the fact that you possess weapons far beyond our ability to counter. You could destroy this station. You could attack Council worlds. How can we trust you not to use this power against us? Claire smiled slightly. How can we trust you not to use your political power against us? The Council represents 47 species. If you decided to embargo Earth, to refuse all trade, to isolate us diplomatically, you could cause enormous damage to human interests. But we're willing. Jake stood in the observation deck of the Leviathan, looking out at the Council station through the massive windows. The station glowed in the darkness of space, lights marking the locations of thousands of habitats and work areas. Around it, the Council fleet had reorganized. The disabled Zenthari cruisers had been towed away for repairs. New ships had taken their positions, but they kept their distance. No one was eager to test the human vessel again. Ben Harris entered the observation deck, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Jake and stood beside him, looking at the same view. Ambassador Mitchell just sent an update, Ben said. The Council is still deliberating. It's been 5 hours. They're scared, Jake said quietly. They've been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Now they have to accept that someone else can challenge them. Will they accept it? They don't have much choice. We're not going away, and we're not going to pretend to be weaker than we are just to make them comfortable. Ben sipped his coffee. You know, when I joined the space service 30 years ago, I never imagined I'd be part of something like this. First contact was supposed to be about exploration and diplomacy, not showing off weapons. We didn't start this, Jake reminded him. They summoned us. They demanded answers. They challenged us to prove ourselves. We just responded to what they asked for. True, but now everything changes. The galaxy knows about us, about what we can do. That's going to have consequences. Good consequences and bad ones, Jake agreed. Some species will want to be our allies. Others will see us as a threat. A few might even try to steal our technology. Let them try, Ben said with a slight smile. Good luck getting past our security systems. Amy's voice came over the ship's communication system. Captain Morrison, Ambassador Mitchell is returning to the Leviathan. The Council has reached a decision. Understood. I'll meet her at the docking bay. Jake and Ben made their way through the corridors of the massive ship. They passed crew members going about their duties, maintaining systems, running diagnostics, staying ready for whatever might happen next. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine Earth's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Claire's shuttle docked smoothly, and she emerged looking tired but satisfied. Her Marines followed her out, and Jake could see from their expressions that the news was good. The Council has agreed to our terms, Claire said without preamble. Earth will be recognized as a sovereign power with full diplomatic rights. We're not required to join the Council, but we're invited to send observers to their sessions. We can establish embassies on Council worlds, and they can establish embassies on Earth. What about military restrictions? Ben asked. None. The Council accepts that humanity has the right to maintain whatever military forces we deem necessary for our defense. They won't attempt to limit our ship construction or technology development. Jake let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. That's better than we hoped for. They were motivated to be reasonable, Claire said with a slight smile. Vexathara made it clear to the other counselors that attempting to restrict humanity would likely lead to conflict, and no one wants that. Not after what they saw today. What about trade and technology sharing? Jake asked. Open trade is permitted under standard galactic commerce regulations. Technology sharing is optional on both sides. We're not required to give them our weapons technology, and they're not required to share their most advanced systems with us. But both sides are encouraged to cooperate in areas of mutual interest. Sounds like a fair deal. It is, and there's more. Claire looked pleased. Several species have already approached me privately about establishing bilateral agreements. The Luminar want to discuss power generation technology. The Marathi are interested in our shield systems. The Saurians want to talk about agricultural techniques. Ben raised an eyebrow. They want to learn from us? They'd be fools not to, Claire said. We demonstrated capabilities they cannot match. Now they want to understand how we did it. And if we're willing to share some knowledge, it builds goodwill. We should be careful about what we share, Jake cautioned. We don't want to give away our advantages. Agreed. But there are technologies we can share that would benefit everyone without compromising our security. Medical advances, for example. Agricultural methods, environmental management. These are areas where humanity has developed effective solutions that could help other species. They walked together toward the bridge, discussing the implications of the Council's decision. Earth had achieved its goal. Humanity was now recognized as a legitimate power in galactic politics. The years of isolation were over. On the bridge, the crew was monitoring the situation around the Council station. More ships were arriving every hour. Delegations from species that had heard about the demonstration and wanted to see the human vessel for themselves. Sir, we're receiving over 100 communication requests, Amy reported. Different species wanting to talk to us, ask questions, establish contact. Prioritize them, Jake ordered. Start with the major Council species, then work through the others. Be polite but firm. We're willing to talk, but we're not going to answer every question they have. Yes, sir. Jake settled into his command chair and brought up the tactical display. It showed the Leviathan at the center, surrounded by hundreds of Council ships at various distances. Some were military vessels, still wary of the human ship. Others were civilian craft, diplomats and observers who wanted a closer look at the vessel that had changed everything. You know, Ben said quietly, this is just the beginning. Once we go back to Earth and report success, the government is going to want to expand our presence out here. More ships, more embassies, more trade missions? That's the plan, Jake agreed. Earth spent 70 years preparing for this moment. Now we execute the next phase, which is integration. Becoming part of the galactic community without losing our independence, learning from other species while maintaining our own identity, building alliances without creating dependencies. Ambitious. Humanity doesn't think small, Jake said with a slight smile. Over the next several hours, the Leviathan's communication systems were busy with incoming and outgoing messages. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly wanted to know everything about Earth. Where was it located? How many humans were there? What were their cultural practices? What did they want? Jake authorized his crew to answer basic questions but to keep strategic information classified. Earth's location was known, but the details of human military strength remained secret. The galaxy knew about the Leviathan, but they did not know how many other ships like it existed. They knew humanity had advanced technology, but they did not know the full extent of human capabilities. That uncertainty was valuable. As long as other species were not sure what humanity could do, they would be cautious about challenging Earth. It was a form of deterrence that did not require constant displays of force. Ambassador Mitchell worked tirelessly, conducting meetings with various species representatives. She negotiated preliminary trade agreements, discussed cultural exchange programs, and laid the groundwork for future cooperation. By the time the Leviathan was scheduled to depart, Earth had established friendly relations with over 20 different species. Finally, 3 days after the demonstration, Jake gave the order to prepare for departure. The Leviathan had accomplished its mission. Humanity had been recognized. Earth's sovereignty had been accepted. Now it was time to go home and report success. All stations prepare for departure, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. We leave in 1 hour. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, securing systems and running final checks. Claire and her diplomatic team prepared their reports. Ben oversaw the navigation calculations for the journey back to Earth. Jake stood on the bridge looking at the council station one last time. It was a remarkable achievement, this collection of species working together despite their differences. Humanity could learn from that, but Earth would do it on their own terms, as equals rather than subordinates. "Sir, we're receiving a message from High Counselor Vex Ithera," Amy said. "Put it through." The Zenthari's face appeared on the view screen. His mandibles moved in what Jake had learned was a gesture of respect. "Commander Morrison, I wanted to speak with you before your departure. What happened here over the past few days will be remembered for a long time. Humanity has made quite an impression." "We did what was necessary, Counselor," Jake replied. "Nothing more. You demonstrated power and restraint in equal measure. That is not an easy balance to achieve. The Council respects that. Thank you. We hope this is the beginning of a productive relationship between Earth and the Council species." "As do I. Travel safely, Commander, and know that you are welcome to return at any time." "We appreciate that, Counselor. Until we meet again." The channel closed. Jake turned to his navigation officer. "Set course for Earth, maximum cruise speed." "Course laid in." "Sir, take us home." The Leviathan turned with ponderous grace, its massive bulk moving with precision that seemed impossible for something so large. The engines flared to life, controlled fusion reactions producing thrust that would